Is this some kind of joke? The voice was young, sharp, and coated in a thick layer of contempt. It belonged to a man named Kyle, the owner of Tactical Advantage Armory, a gun shop so modern and sterile it felt more like a showroom for military-grade hardware than a place for hobbyists. He stood with his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he looked down at the old man standing before his glass counter. "Can I help you, Pops, or are you just here to smell the Cosmoline?" Gordon Holt, 86 years old, did not react. His back was a little stooped from the long march of years, but his eyes were clear and steady. They held a calm that seemed to absorb the younger man's hostility without reflection. He wore a simple worn leather jacket over a plaid shirt, his hands resting gently on the countertop. He had been quietly examining a display of vintage firearm cleaning kits, his gaze lingering on a particular set of brass jags and brushes. He finally looked up from the display, his gaze meeting Kyle's. "I'm looking for a recoil spring guide for a 1911 A1, Gordon said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "An original from the mid-40s if you have one, or something period correct." Kyle let out a short, derisive laugh. A couple of younger customers decked out in tactical gear and operator beards snickered along with him. "A 1911? Seriously? Grandpa, that's a museum piece. Why don't you get with the times? I can set you up with a modern polymer frame, lighter, higher capacity, something you can actually handle." He winked at his friends. "Wouldn't want you to break a hip." Gordon's expression didn't change. He simply waited, his patience a silent, immovable wall. "I'm not here for a new pistol," he said evenly. "I'm here for the part." The owner's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation. This old man wasn't playing his part. He was supposed to be doddering, easily intimidated, a relic to be mocked and dismissed. Instead, he just stood there, his quiet dignity, a subtle rebuke to Kyle's performance. "Look, we don't carry junk parts for ancient firearms," Kyle snapped, his voice rising. "This is a high-end establishment. We cater to serious shooters, not guys looking to patch up their granddaddy's war trophy." He leaned forward, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial, insulting tone. "Frankly, you don't look like our typical clientele. I'm not even sure you could pass the background check." A hush fell over the small group of onlookers. The insult was blatant, a direct accusation of senility or criminality. Gordon Holt slowly reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet, the kind that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases were like canyons in the hide. He opened it with deliberate, unhurried movements. Kyle's impatience boiled over. "I don't have time for this. You're holding up my customers. Either buy something modern or get out." Gordon didn't look up from his wallet. He was searching for his driver's license, his old fingers carefully navigating the familiar slots. The simple act of him taking his time seemed to enrage the shop owner further. It was a rejection of the fast-paced, high-pressure world Kyle had built for himself. "Did you hear me?" Kyle's voice was a sharp crack in the quiet store. He gestured toward the door with a flick of his head. "I want you to leave. Now. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Gordon finally found his license and placed it on the counter. His hand was steady. There was no tremor of fear or anger. There was only a profound sense of weariness, a disappointment that felt ancient. Kyle didn't even glance at the ID. He was on a power trip now, fueled by the attention of his small audience. He saw the old man's jacket was slightly unzipped, revealing the simple cotton of his plaid shirt. He noticed something pinned to the faded inner lining of the leather, a small, tarnished piece of metal shaped like a star. It looked cheap, like something from a gumball machine. "What's that piece of tin you got there?" Kyle sneered, pointing. "Did you win a prize at the county fair?" As Kyle spoke, he reached out, intending to shove Gordon toward the door. His thumb brushed against the old leather of the jacket, pressing for a moment against the small, hard shape of the metal star pinned inside. The sterile smell of gun oil and air conditioning vanished. For a split second, the world dissolved into a cacophony of sound and sensation. The deafening roar of artillery, the high-pitched scream of incoming mortar fire, the taste of frozen dirt and cordite filled Gordon's mouth. He felt the crushing weight of a friend on his back, the warm, sticky wetness seeping through his own uniform in the brutal sub-zero air of a Korean mountain pass. A memory flashed behind his eyes, a commanding officer, his face grim and frostbitten, pressing that same small, cold piece of metal into his palm. A voice strained with exhaustion and respect cut through the noise of battle. "You earned this, son." Then, just as quickly, the vision was gone. Gordon was back in the gun shop, Kyle's hand on his arm, the owner's sneering face just inches from his own. The tarnished silver star beneath his jacket felt impossibly heavy. Kyle shoved him, a hard, jarring push that sent the old man stumbling back a step. "I said get out, now. In a quiet corner of the shop, partially hidden behind a rack of overpriced tactical vests, a young man had been watching the entire exchange. He was in his early 20s, with a haircut so sharp and precise you could set a level to it. He wore civilian clothes, a plain t-shirt and jeans, but he stood with a ramrod straight posture that was anything but civilian. His name was Corporal Evans, and he was 2 weeks into his leave from the Marine Corps Security Guard detachment at the American Embassy in Paris. He was just here to browse, to feel a sense of normalcy before heading back overseas. He had noticed the old man when he first walked in. He'd noticed the quiet way Gordon carried himself, the economic and deliberate way he moved. He'd also noticed the faint, almost invisible outline of a faded patch on the shoulder of the old leather jacket, a shape he vaguely recognized from the history books at Paris Island. But it was the disrespect, the raw, undiluted contempt from the shop owner that made his blood run cold. He had seen ambassadors and foreign dignitaries treated with less ceremony, but he had never seen an old man treated with such venom for no reason. When Kyle physically shoved Gordon, something inside Corporal Evans snapped into place. It wasn't rage. It was a cold, clear sense of duty. He watched as Gordon, without a word of protest, turned and walked slowly out of the shop, the door hissing shut behind him. Kyle stood there, puffing out his chest, victorious. Evans set the magazine he was holding back on the shelf with a quiet click. He walked past the counter, giving Kyle a look so devoid of emotion it was more terrifying than any threat. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright sunlight of the strip mall parking lot. He saw Gordon Holt sitting on a concrete bench near the curb, not looking defeated but simply staring at the horizon, as if waiting for a bus that was decades late. Evans walked over, stopping a respectful distance away. "Sir?" he said, his voice quiet. Gordon turned his head slowly, his calm eyes settling on the young man. "Are you all right, sir?" Evans asked. Gordon gave a slight nod. "Just catching my breath. What he did in there, that wasn't right," Evans said, his jaw tight. He hesitated for a second, then committed. "That patch on your jacket, is that 1st Marine Division?" Gordon's eyes flickered with a hint of surprise. "You have a good eye, son. It's been a long time since anyone's recognized that." Evans felt a jolt. 1st Marine Division. And from the looks of this man, it wasn't from a recent conflict. He pulled out his phone. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to make a phone call. I think some people would want to know about how you were just treated." Gordon looked at the young Marine, then back at the gun shop, then back to the young man's earnest, angry face. He gave another slow nod. "Do what you feel you need to do, son." Evans stepped away and dialed a number he knew by heart. It wasn't 911. It was the duty phone for his old unit's gunnery sergeant back at Marine Corps Base Quantico, less than 30 miles down the highway. The phone was answered on the second ring. Gunnery Sergeant Miller. The voice was pure gravel and authority. "Gunny, it's Corporal Evans." "Evans, what do you need?" "I thought you were on leave." "I am, Gunny, but I'm at a gun shop off Route 1, Tactical Advantage Armory, and you are not going to believe what I just saw." Evans quickly and professionally recounted the entire incident, his voice low and tight with controlled fury. He described the owner, the insults, the physical shove. He ended with the most important details. "Gunny, the man he threw out, he's an old-timer, wearing a 1st Marine Division patch. His name is Gordon Holt." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was static. When Gunnery Sergeant Miller finally spoke, his voice had lost all its gruffness. It was replaced by something else, something Evans had never heard before. Awe. "Say that name again, Corporal." "Gordon Holt, Gunny." Another pause. Then the command came, sharp and absolute. "Stay right where you are, Evans. Do not let that man leave. I don't care what you have to do. Offer to buy him lunch. Talk about the weather. Just keep him there. I'm making a call." The line went dead. Corporal Evans lowered his phone, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. He had just lit a fuse, and he had no idea how big the explosion was going to be. Gunnery Sergeant Miller stood in his small, cluttered office at Quantico, the phone still pressed to his ear. He hung it up, his hand trembling slightly. Gordon Holt, the name echoed in his mind, dredged up from dusty lecture halls and books on Marine Corps lore. It couldn't be. He didn't bother with the chain of command. He didn't call a captain or a major. He strode out of his office, his boots thumping on the linoleum with a purpose that made junior Marines flatten themselves against the walls. He walked directly to the headquarters building, past the colonel's and major's offices, and stopped before the polished oak door of the base commander, a 2-star general. He knocked once, a sharp, authoritative rap, and entered without waiting for permission. General Morrison, a man who had led troops in Fallujah and Helmand, looked up from his desk, His eyes narrowed at the breach of protocol. "Gunnery Sergeant?" "Sir, my apologies," Miller said, snapping to attention, "but I just received a call from a Marine on leave. He's at a civilian establishment in town. He's with a man named Gordon Holt." The general's expression didn't change, but a flicker of recognition appeared in his eyes. He swiveled in his chair and typed the name into a secure terminal on his desk. He stared at the screen for a long moment. "Miller,